Good morning, everyone. Um, Hello, Ryan, Scott, and Suzanne. So, today we will be studying the second part of the Anupada Sutta. I believe there is the link of the sutta at the very top of the live chat. Hello, Andy. If you have any questions at any point, you can write them in the live chat, and then Bante will address them after he goes through the sutta. And there's also a link to a calendar where you can see all the upcoming events. It's a Google Calendar that our volunteer Dave, big shout out to Dave, has put together. So that should give you an easy way to look at what's upcoming and find the link to connect straight away. Hello, Victoria. Welcome, Debbie, Melvin, Kyle. Good to see you. Hello, Ella from Poland. Lovely to see you all this morning. And without further ado, I'll pass it on to Bante so we can start with our sutta session.
Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namassami. Okay, good morning. We'll be picking up where we left off with the Anupada Sutta. So last week we had gone through the first half or so of this discourse, which covers the detailed analysis of the four jhanas. So the four states of strong samadhi, which the Buddha speaks about all throughout the suttas, in many, many places throughout the suttas. And at this point, we'll be looking at the rest of the sutta, which covers the formless attainments. So the states of samadhi, which are sometimes called the arupa jhana. So arupa means no physical form or no body, no physicality at all. Or sometimes called the formless ayatanas. So ayatana means the extent or the domain, territory, the dimension. And these are called this because in these states of experience, in these samadhi states, one has no experience of anything physical. So they're completely non-physical experiences. So there's the mind, but the mind is not having any kind of physical experience. And I should explain, just right off the bat, I should explain that the formless attainments do not seem to be a requirement to attain awakening. So in the suttas, when the Buddha talks about samadhi, he normally talks about the four jhanas. When he talks about samma samadhi, there's a few places in the suttas where samma samadhi is defined as the four jhanas. Sometimes he defines it in more simple ways of just talking about samadhi as being when the mind is collected and not distracted, which is basically the same as saying that it's in jhana. It's just saying it without directly using that word. But there's a handful of places where he does talk about these states of samadhi beyond form. And in my opinion, the main reason why the Buddha speaks about these states of mind is because many people attain these states of formless samadhi, these states where the physical world disappears entirely, and they have this very peaceful, sublime experience, and they think that they've attained awakening, or they think that they've attained some stage of spiritual development. They think that they've reached some deep insight. But it's not a stage of deep insight. It's just a temporary shift in one's perception. A temporary shift in one's perception away from the physical world into a completely mental experience, which is very peaceful, can be very sublime and wonderful, and the mind can feel very pure and clear during that time, but it comes to an end. It's impermanent, it's temporary. It's not a genuine transformation of mind in that it's reversible. Once one comes out of that formless samadhi, then you're back to where you started. Your mind is still a mess. So this is a surface level change rather than a deep change. It's a surface level change which can be wiped away very quickly and easily. So without further ado, I'll start talking about this discourse. So as usual, I'll read through it and explain it a little bit, and then read a bit more and explain a bit more, and so on. So the Buddha says, again, monks, by completely surpassing the extent... Oh wait, I'm getting a little ahead of myself. Again, monks, by completely surpassing perceptions of physical form, with the disappearance of perceptions of resistance, and by non-attention to perceptions of diversity, perceiving that space is infinite, Sariputta attains and remains in the extent of infinite space. So first, just to talk a little bit about this, because this is giving instructions on how someone can access this state of mind. So first off, completely surpassing perceptions of physical form. So in other words, one disregards all experience of physical things. One completely disregards all experience of the physical body, of the physical world, and one is completely focused on empty space, infinite, boundless, empty space. So there's no perception of resistance. So resistance here means, for example, when you press against a physical object that resists you, there's a resistance of movement. Or when you're swimming, there's resistance from the water. Or when you're falling, there's resistance from the air. So physical things have the quality of resisting movement through them. So one, in this case, is completely disregarding perceptions of resistance. So there's the perception of just infinite open space. And it says here also non-attention to perceptions of diversity. So what this means is not paying attention to the variety of different physical objects, the diversity of physical objects within the physical world. So in order to access this state of mind, one is disregarding all of the different physical objects, disregarding the impediment to motion in the physical world, disregarding all physical forms entirely. And rupa here, again, can mean body. So this could also mean disregarding the body entirely. And focusing on the perception of infinite space. So if one does this with full concentration, with complete collectedness of mind, then this can be your experience. You can have the experience of there being just infinite, open, empty space with no physical objects at all. So this came up a couple of times during the weekend when we were going through the meditation on the 6 elements, because the 5th element is the space element. And there's some similarity here in that with the meditation on the space element, we're starting to get in touch with that experience of what space itself is like. And in order to do that, it's necessary to look beneath the physicality of the world. It's necessary to look beneath the physical things of the world in order to get in touch with the space element. But the meditation on the space element is part of this set of 6 elements. So meditation on the 6 elements. So it's not something which is taken in isolation. And it's done with the purpose of understanding all the different components of our experience. So with the 6 elements, we're not trying to disregard form or detach from form or eliminate experience of form. Rather, what we're trying to do is to understand all the components that together make up our everyday experience, and to recognize that those components are not me and not mine. To recognize that those components are just part of the natural world. So that's the space as part of the meditation on the 6 elements. So that's a bit different from what's being described here. So here, the meditation on the domain or the dimension of infinite space, one is trying to get into a perception where there is nothing in the mind except the perception of infinite open space. Nothing else. So this again is a state of samadhi, and it's a state of samadhi in which the mind has only one object, which is infinite space. Empty, limitless space. A little bit about the word ayatana. So the word ayatana here is translated as extent. And elsewhere you might see ayatana translated as dimension, or you might see it translated as domain, or you might see it translated as sphere. For those who translate it as sphere, it's important to keep in mind that sphere here is in its meaning of domain, not in its meaning of globe or ball, but its meaning of domain. So the word ayatana literally means extending or reaching. So it has this sense of the extent of something, the reach of something. So then next Sariputta describes his experience of the different components present when one's mind is fully immersed in the domain of infinite space. So there is, first off, the perception of infinite space, which should come as no surprise. Then there's mental one-pointedness, sense contact, feeling, recognition, volition, mentality, interest, resolve, energy, mindfulness, equanimity, and attention. So these are all still pretty much the same mental qualities that we've seen in each of the 4 ordinary jhanas. So the main difference here is that the primary quality is the perception of infinite space, but the other qualities remain the same. So this is indicating that even though one is not aware of any physical objects, even though one is aware only of infinite space, that all physical things have been replaced with the perception of infinite space, even so, the mental components that one is experiencing are still pretty much the same as with the 4 jhanas. So that hasn't significantly changed. What's changed is one's relationship to the outside world, and that one is no longer perceiving any physical things at all. One is only perceiving empty space. So it says, so these mental qualities are progressively identified by him. These phenomena are known by him as they arise, as they persist, and as they disappear. So again, Sariputta is practicing the recognition of impermanence. He's practicing anicca sanya. As he's going through each of these samadhi states, he is perceiving them as impermanent, as constantly changing. Then it says, he understands in this way, it seems that these phenomena were not present, then they manifested, then after being present, they vanished again. In other words, he's recognizing the causal nature of these mental qualities and these aspects of experience, recognizing that they come and go, they appear and vanish. Which also means that he's recognizing that the perception of infinite space is just a perception. It's not touching into some bedrock absolute reality. It's not that true reality is infinite empty space, but rather that this is an experience which arises and then vanishes. It's an experience which is causally produced, lasts for a little while, and then goes away. And continuing, it says, in regard to those phenomena, he remains unattracted, unrepelled, independent, unattached, released, unbound, with an unrestricted mind. So I explained these qualities on Friday, how these qualities are describing the kind of mind that we're working to develop and maintain in our Buddhist practice. So a mind which is neither attracted nor repelled by anything, a mind which does not rely upon or is attached to anything, a mind which is free, free of defilements, free of the hindrances, not limited by our defilements and delusions. However, even having had this experience of infinite space, it says, he understands there is an escape beyond this. Practicing that frequently, he knows that there is a further escape. In other words, Sariputta recognizes that although this experience of infinite space is very peaceful, very pleasant, it's not yet full enlightenment. It's not yet complete freedom from all of one's dukkha. It's not yet complete freedom from all of one's defilements. So he recognizes that it is in fact just a samadhi state. It's not the final goal. So next, it says, again, monks, by completely surpassing the extent of infinite space, perceiving that consciousness is infinite, Sariputta attains and remains in the extent of infinite consciousness. The phenomena which are present in the extent of infinite consciousness, the perception of infinite consciousness, mental one-pointedness, sense contact, feeling, recognition, volition, mentality, interest, resolve, energy, mindfulness, equanimity, and attention are progressively identified by him. And the rest is the same as the previous paragraph. So here, once one is aware of infinite space, the next step is recognizing that that vast domain of infinite space is appearing within consciousness. Therefore, consciousness must also be infinite and boundless. In order for it to hold infinite space, it must be infinite consciousness. In order for it to hold boundless space, it must be boundless consciousness. So in this case, one then is shifting one's attention from the infinite space to the consciousness which is conscious of infinite space. Shifting it to that vast field of awareness in which infinite space appears. So this is then disregarding the space itself, because space is still technically a physical thing, by the way. It's within the physical domain. So the meditation on infinite space is still not quite completely free of the physical realm. There's still a remnant of the physical realm in the form of space. So space is defined in terms of the absence of physical things, in terms of its ability to hold and present physical things. So it's still only one step removed from physical experience. So shifting here to focusing purely on infinite consciousness, one is then completely removed from physicality entirely. So at this point, there's just infinite boundless consciousness. No longer even the sense of space. But once again, as before, Sariputta is recognizing that this is impermanent. This state is impermanent. It comes and it goes. It's not the final goal of awakening. It's not the final goal of full enlightenment. It's just another temporary experience.
Here, buddy.
Cat cameo. It's our little buddy Stan. Those of you who've been to Buddhist insight before might recognize our little buddy here who just wandered across the camera. Hi, buddy. Okay. That was just for the ratings. So then coming back to the sutta. So again, Sariputta recognizes that the experience of infinite consciousness is just another temporary conditional experience, and that it's not complete awakening, it's not enlightenment, it's not the goal of the spiritual life. So recognizing there is an escape beyond this, he seeks a further escape. So the next step, it says, again, monks, by completely surpassing the domain of infinite consciousness, perceiving that there is nothing, Sariputta attains and remains in the extent of nothingness. The phenomena which are present in the extent of nothingness, the perception of nothingness, mental one-pointedness, sense contact, feeling, recognition, volition, mentality, interest, resolve, energy, mindfulness, equanimity, and attention, are progressively identified by him. The rest is the same as before. So here then, it's going one step farther. So it's also letting go of the experience of consciousness and cultivating the perception that there is absolutely nothing existing at all. So once again, this is not absolute reality. It is not correct to say that nothing exists. As we covered a few days ago, I gave a talk on emptiness. So emptiness is not nothingness. Rather, it's the complete unification of nothingness along with everythingness. So the experience of nothingness is a one-sided view of reality. It's only catching half the picture. So there is the possibility to have the experience of nothing existing at all, of being aware of nothing existing, but that's not absolute reality. That's just one corner of reality, which it's possible to experience, possible to view, but it's not ultimately the way things are. It's just one way that we can experience reality. So completely surpassing the domain of infinite consciousness, with the perception there is nothing. So choosing to perceive that there is nothing. So one can have this sort of experience. And one of the Buddha's teachers, one of his meditation teachers, prior to when he set out to figure out the path of awakening on his own, one of his meditation teachers was teaching this practice, the practice of entering into the domain of nothingness, cultivating the perception of nothingness. And that teacher believed that this was the highest goal of the spiritual life. That teacher believed that to enter into the perception of nothingness was complete purification of mind. That the perception of nothingness was a direct perception of ultimate reality. So the Buddha followed that teacher's instructions and entered into the perception of nothingness. But he realized that even though he was able to enter the perception of nothingness, his mind was still defiled. His mind was still deluded. He was still experiencing dukkha, and he didn't yet fully understand why. He didn't yet fully understand the nature of experience. So he concluded that entering the perception of nothingness was not sufficient. He concluded that entering the perception of nothingness was not complete enlightenment. It was just another temporary, limited experience. So he left behind that teacher and he went off in search of other teachers who could hopefully teach him the path to enlightenment, which was a futile search because there were no Buddhas yet at that time, so he wasn't going to find one. But he did find a teacher who taught an even more subtle and refined state of consciousness, even more subtle and refined form of samadhi, which is the next one. So the sutta continues. Again, monks, by completely surpassing the extent of nothingness, Sariputta attains and remains in the extent of neither perception nor non-perception. So neither perception nor non-perception. So this is defined as a state of mind which is so subtle that you can't say that there's any perception happening. You can't say that there's any mental activity at all happening. And yet, the mind is not asleep. So one is awake, but not quite aware of anything. So this one is handled quite a bit differently than the previous 7. So I'm going to read through this paragraph. After mindfully emerging from that attainment, he regards those phenomena which have passed, ceased, and changed in this way. It seems that these phenomena were not present, then they manifested, then after being present, they vanished again. In regard to those phenomena, he remains unattracted, unrepelled, independent, unattached, released, unbound, with an unrestricted mind. He understands there is an escape beyond this. Practicing that frequently, he knows that there is a further escape. So this one is quite a bit different from the previous 7. So in the first 4 jhanas, Sariputta is analyzing the experience while he's in it. He's clearly perceiving the different mental components present while in each of the 4 jhanas. He's practicing the perception of impermanence while in jhana. And he recognizes that there is a higher escape while in jhana. And the same with the first 3 of the formless perceptions. So with the perception of infinite space, infinite consciousness, and nothingness, again, he's analyzing his experience while he's in that state, perceiving impermanence while he's in that state, recognizing a higher escape while he's in that state. But with the attainment of neither perception nor non-perception, it just says he enters it, then he emerges from it, then he reflects on what just happened. So this is distinctly different in that what this is pointing to is that in the state of neither perception nor non-perception, the mind is too subtle. Like one's awareness is not active enough to catch any information at all about what's going on. It's only after coming out of that state of samadhi that one is able to reflect back on it. So again, this is important because there are some teachings available from outside of the suttas. There are some teachings outside of the suttas which say this about all the previous states of samadhi. So there are some non-sutta teachings which say that also for the first 4 jhanas, one has to emerge from them and then reflect back on them. But this is clearly in contradiction to the sutta. So in the sutta, it's very clear that with the first 4 jhanas and the first 3 formless attainments, while in them, one can clearly reflect and perceive the contents of them, contents of mind, and one can practice vipassana meditation while in those states of samadhi. And it's only in the 8th one of these samadhis, it's only in the perception of neither, the experience of neither perception nor non-perception, that one no longer has the ability to clearly perceive and reflect on one's experience while in the state of samadhi. It's only at this point, neither perception nor non-perception, that one has to emerge from the state of samadhi before one can practice vipassana. But even this very refined state of mind, which was what the Buddha's last meditation teacher was teaching, the Buddha's last meditation teacher was teaching this samadhi state, neither perception or non-perception, and the Buddha reached it. And the Buddha realized once again that it was not the solution that he still had defilements, he still had confusion, that attaining the perception, experience of neither perception or non-perception did not remove his dukkha, did not clean up his defilements, did not bring true wisdom. It was just another temporary experience. So similarly, Sariputta attained neither perception nor non-perception, and similarly recognized this is not enlightenment. This is just another temporary experience. So, continuing on, it says, again, monks, by completely surpassing the extent of neither perception nor non-perception, Sariputta attains and remains in the cessation of perception and feeling. After seeing them with wisdom, the taints are completely eliminated. He mindfully emerges from that attainment. After mindfully emerging from that attainment, he regards those phenomena which have passed, ceased, and changed in this way. It seems that these phenomena were not present, then they manifested. Then after being present, they vanished again. In regard to those phenomena, he remains unattracted, unrepelled, independent, unattached, released, unbound with an unrestricted mind. He understands there is no escape beyond this. Practicing that frequently, he knows that there is not a further escape. So, this section here is moving on to a particular state of samadhi, which here it's called sanya vedyata nirodha, the cessation of perception and feeling. Elsewhere, you'll also see it referred to as nirodha samapatti, the attainment of cessation. But in the suttas, it's usually referred to in this way, sanya vedyata nirodha. So sanya is perception, vedyata means what is felt, and nirodha is cessation, so cessation of what is felt and perceived, cessation of perception and feeling. And this state is defined as being one which requires that one have already eliminated sensual desire and aversion. So one must already be a non-returner or an arhat in order to enter the cessation of perception and feeling. So it's not a state of samadhi which is accessible to ordinary people. It's something which relies upon already cultivating a certain degree of wisdom, a certain degree of insight, a certain degree of mental purity. So Sariputta enters the cessation of perception and feeling. And it says, next it says, after seeing them with wisdom, the taints are completely eliminated. So in other words, entering the cessation of perception and feeling, Sariputta has seen his defilements clearly with wisdom and abandons them entirely. He lets go of them entirely. And the placement of this statement is interesting because this is placed after he attains and remains in the cessation of perception and feeling. So the implication is that this also is happening while he's in that state. So while he's in the state of the cessation of perception and feeling, he sees his defilements with wisdom and they're abandoned, they're eliminated, they're completely removed. Another interpretation would be that's happening simultaneously with attaining the cessation of perception and feeling. So as he recognizes the defilements and eliminates them completely, then he's attaining the cessation of perception and feeling because there's no longer any craving for any perception. There's no longer the craving for any kind of feeling. So it's possible for them to cease entirely for a period of time. So the cessation of perception and feeling, again, is a temporary experience, but it's a temporary experience which is only possible if the mind has absolutely no desire whatsoever for any kind of experience. So again, there's two ways of interpreting this, and I'm inclined to actually to interpret it exactly the way it's written, which is that Sariputta enters the cessation of perception and feeling, which means he had already purified his mind to a very high degree. And then entering the perception of cessation and feeling then he clearly saw his remaining defilements, and clearly seeing them, they disappeared. They were eliminated entirely. Then he emerges from that attainment and reflects upon it once again as being impermanent. And he recognizes that at this point, having eliminated all of his defilements, there's nothing else to do. So he says there's no escape beyond this. So when he says there's no escape beyond this, what that means is he's attained full enlightenment. So he knows there's nothing further. There's nothing higher than to completely eliminate all of one's defilements with wisdom. Then it says, the Buddha says, monks, about whom one who is speaking rightly might say, he has attained mastery and perfection in noble conduct. He has attained mastery and perfection in noble concentration. He has attained mastery and perfection in noble wisdom. He has attained mastery and perfection in noble liberation. It is about Sariputta that one who is speaking rightly might say these things. So here the Buddha is praising Sariputta and also emphasizing that Sariputta did perfect his sila. So it's translated here as noble conduct is Arya Sila. So the sila, which is noble, or you could translate that the sila of the noble ones. So in the suttas, Arya or noble refers to those who have attained awakening. So he's attained the conduct of the noble ones, the samadhi of the noble ones, the wisdom of the noble ones, the liberation of the noble ones. And then the Buddha carries on with praising Sariputta. He says, monks, about whom one who is speaking rightly might say, he is the Blessed One's legitimate son, born from his mouth, born from the Dhamma, created by the Dhamma, heir to the Dhamma, rather than heir to material things. It is about Sariputta, the one who is speaking rightly might say this. Monks, Sariputta rightly continues the rolling of the unsurpassed wheel of Dhamma, which was set in motion by the Tathagata. This is what the Blessed One said. Satisfied, those monks delighted in the Blessed One's speech. So this is emphasizing that Sariputta completely understood the Dhamma. So he followed the Buddha's instructions. He completely understood his instructions, and he practiced them to their fullest extent. So therefore, he is spoken of as the Buddha's legitimate child, in that he's completely inherited what the Buddha was teaching, born from his mouth. So that means Sariputta is a complete expression of what the Buddha was talking about. Born from the Dhamma, created by the Dhamma. So Sariputta is, he's completely relinquished his prior opinions and viewpoints and is fully in line with the Dhamma. Heir to the Dhamma rather than heir to material things. So this is a reference to another sutta, the Dhammadayada Sutta, where the Buddha says, be the heirs to my Dhamma, not my heirs in material things. In other words, saying that what we're really trying to get from the Buddha is not pretty robes and nice food and nice buildings and so on, but we're trying to get a deep understanding of the true nature of reality so that we can completely transcend all of dukkha. That's our purpose in learning the Dhamma and practicing the Buddha way. So that's it for this sutta. At this time, I'd like to go ahead and take questions, if there are any.
Mm-hmm.
So,
thank you, Bante. So there were a lot of appreciative comments on Stan.
I figured as much.
And then Ki, Sally, Edith, Jen, Suzanne, and Fisha, they all have joined us. Hello, everyone. And Suzanne is saying, how did the Buddha know air and space were different elements when it was so long before scientific study or space exploration? I know he's all knowing, but that's like really impressive.
Yeah, he's impressive. I agree. No.
What if you're, she also asks, what if you're just okay with less suffering and not that interested in enlightenment? Isn't wanting to be free of suffering itself an attachment?
Well, actually, if you're just interested in less suffering, just stay with wanting to be interested in less suffering, because then you'll just want less and less and less until eventually you'll want it all gone. So being interested in less suffering, as long as you keep that, will lead to full enlightenment. And yeah, it is a form of attachment, but that's fine, because it's the attachment that leads to being free of all attachments.
She continues, or does it just mean I'm spiritually lazy?
You may, in fact, be spiritually lazy. Yeah, but that's for you to find out.
Or is the point the benefit my enlightenment would have for others?
That's actually a really good attitude to take. Many people find it very enlivening. They find it gives a lot of life and vigor to their practice, to reflect that their practice is for the benefit of others as well as for themselves. In fact, some people find their primary motivation is the wish to be of benefit to others. So yeah, that's a wonderful state of mind. It's very wholesome. And it can bring a lot of power and strength to your practice.
And Jen says, I think enlightenment in itself is the way out of suffering to break samsara, or else we're just reborn into more suffering.
Yeah.
And Drew addresses also this point with Suzanne, saying, Suzanne, certain strivings are unwholesome and certain are wholesome. The striving for awakening is a wholesome one, and it is extremely useful and only let go at the moment of awakening. All right. There's a whole conversation going on here. Actually, no, about enlightenment. So Suzanne says, I mean, there's also conversation about Stan. But Suzanne said, I guess I'm just seeing I'm content with contentment. I'm content with less suffering, but that may not be the right view.
It's a start. It's a start. So don't disregard it. Again, it's a step in the right direction. And one of the wonderful things about Dhamma practice is, as the Buddha said, it's good in the beginning, it's good in the middle, and it's good at the end. So when you start practicing, you'll get a little bit of benefit. And if you practice a little bit, then you'll definitely get some goodness from it. And if you practice a bit more, then you'll get a bit more benefit. If you practice a lot, you'll get a lot of benefit. And if you practice completely, then you can get the highest benefit. So it's fine. You practice to the extent that you're willing to practice at the time being, keeping in mind that there is something higher. And that if we commit more fully, if we practice more deeply, then we'll get even more benefit. So step by step is perfectly okay. No problem.
And Drew says, this part confuses me. Is it part of the traditional story that Sariputta attained full awakening while fanning the Buddha who was giving a Dhamma talk to Sariputta's brother/cousin?
Yeah, there is a sutta where that's mentioned. Or is that when he attained stream entry? Ooh, I don't remember. Are you sure Sariputta attained full enlightenment in that sutta, or did he attain stream entry? I actually don't remember off the top of my head. Anyway, what's the next question?
Andrew says, upon increasing familiarity with formless realms, is it theoretically possible this could condition the mind to visit a Deva realm unintentionally? Not at all suggesting that this should ever be a goal.
Yeah. It's not terribly uncommon for people to have experiences with devas or with deva realms as their practice develops. But it's kind of a side effect. It's not really something to aim at, as you mentioned. But it is a side effect, it's not uncommon.
And Scott says, after seeing them with wisdom, the taints are completely eliminated. Regards to that, what does wisdom mean? Impermanent, not self, etc.
Yeah. Yeah, and also clearly seeing that the defilements are the cause of our dukkha. One of the ongoing problems that we have as unenlightened beings is that we still have the persistent delusion that our defilements are either things that bring us happiness or that they are things that define us. So when we clearly see that defilements are just pure dukkha, then we let go of them. And that also means seeing that they are impermanent, which means it's possible to let go of them, and saying that they're not self, which means that we're willing to let go of them. So clearly seeing things with wisdom means clearly seeing them in terms of the three characteristics.
And Sally says, the first level of formless world is boundless space, which is the fifth element. Is it possible to attain formless arupa jhana without the foundation from first to fourth jhana?
That's an ongoing subject of debate. My personal inclination is to say no. My personal inclination is to say that without the complete stability, that deep stability of mind that comes through cultivating the ordinary jhanas, that it would be very difficult, if not impossible, to enter fully into the extent of infinite space. So you can get a certain shallow experience of it, but the more you focus on it, actually naturally, the more you focus on space as a meditation object, the more stabilized the mind becomes in that. So you'll naturally start to move towards first jhana anyway, as the mind, when holding still on any object, will move towards first jhana. So if you're holding the mind still on space as your object, then the mind will move towards jhana, and you'll enter into jhana. And as you become increasingly focused, increasingly steady, then you'll progress towards the experience of complete immersion in infinite space. But those are just my opinions. I've never made any effort to enter the formless attainments. It's never been something that interested me. And since it doesn't seem to be a requisite for enlightenment, it's not something which I've made any effort towards. So honestly, I cannot speak from experience about the formless attainments. I can only speak about from what I've studied and what I've heard from other teachers. Okay.
Thank you, Bhante. And Sally also asks, is this boundless consciousness meditation in this sutta the same as the sixth element meditation? If so, can we follow this instruction?
So as I mentioned earlier, as I see it, there is a distinct difference here in that the space and consciousness elements, for one thing, they come together as part of the set of the six elements. And second, they are practices of not self, anatta sanya. They're practices of developing the recognition of not self. So within the context of the six elements, space and consciousness are examined as being aspects of our experience, which we are trying to see as not self. So that's a quite different practice and goal, as opposed to just trying to immerse the mind in the experience of infinite space, or trying to immerse the mind in the experience of infinite consciousness. Okay.
And thank you, Bhante. And Green Obino, who I don't remember the name, I think it was James or Jack, asks, do the Brahma Viharas lead to the jhanas, in your opinion?
They can. If you hold the mind completely steady on the feeling of metta, for example, then the mind can enter jhana. Yeah. In fact, Bhante Gunaratana, Bhante Ji, he calls metta the back door to jhana, the shortcut to jhana. Yep.
And he also mentions that the Anupada Sutta is recounting what mentally occurred in the other Sariputta Sutta, from my understanding. That
Okay.
is his
Okay.
opinion. And Krazi Bukchu asks, is the practice then all about being mindful always of the wholesome and unwholesome states that arise and attempt to remove all unwholesome states and cultivate the wholesome states?
Well, that's right effort, samavayama, which is part of the Noble Eightfold Path. And yeah, if you practice right effort all the time, then you'll always move unerringly towards enlightenment. Yeah.
And Mehmet says, Sariputta attains full enlightenment during fanning the Buddha while he's giving a discourse to his nephew.
Mm.
At the end, the nephew attains stream entry.
Mm.
As I understand, stream entry is the initial direct perception of the awakening experience. Then the person goes back to the regular state, so the cessation of suffering ceases. Doesn't it mean this is also an impermanent experience where all defilements diminish?
Stream entry? I'm not quite understanding. Is he asking, is stream entry an impermanent state?
As I understand, stream entry is the initial direct perception of the awakening experience. Then the person goes back to the regular state, so the cessation of suffering ceases. Doesn't it mean this is also an impermanent experience where all defilements diminish? Yeah, I'm not quite sure. Mehmet, if you can elaborate further.
So it sounds to me like you might be drawing on apocryphal descriptions of stream entry. So stream entry, as it's defined in the Suttas, is quite a bit different from how stream entry came to be defined in the long history of post-canonical literature. So in the Suttas, the Buddha does not define stream entry as the temporary perception of the cessation of dukkha. He defines it as recognizing the body and mind are not who we are. That's fundamentally what it is. It's the first major breakthrough to not self, and it's irreversible. It doesn't change. So in later Buddhist literature, starting 1,000 years after the Buddha's death, then the experience of stream entry started to be defined in a rather different way than the way the Buddha talked about it. So I'm not really a fan of that other description because it's caused 1,500 years of confusion. I think it's much safer to go with what's in the suttas rather than to go with what's in the later commentary or literature. Okay.
Thank you, Bhante. And Edith says, is there a much clearer difference in experiencing the fourth immaterial jhana and complete cessation? Knowing the defilements are gone takes some time.
Can you read that one again, please?
Is there a much clearer difference in experiencing the fourth immaterial jhana and complete cessation? Knowing the defilements are gone takes some time. She also asks later on, can one enter the formless jhanas without you intending to enter them? I suppose resultants can be quite powerful.
So to address the first part of that, disclaimer, I haven't experienced either the extent of neither perception or non-perception, nor have I experienced the cessation of perception and feeling. So my ability to speak with much depth and clarity about either one of those experiences is therefore a little bit limited. So I really can't say with any detail about how clearly or how distinctly different these are, except just to go off what we see here. So in neither perception nor non-perception, the mind still has some subtle residue of awareness, but it's so subtle that it's incapable of distinguishing or forming any clear understanding of anything. The cessation of perception and feeling, there appears to be no perception at all. So perception has entirely ceased. But again, there is this peculiar statement here placed after Sariputta enters that, but before he emerges from it, that he sees the taints with wisdom and they're completely eliminated. So that's a little bit puzzling because that implies that there is some clarity of mental activity occurring even within the cessation of perception and feeling. But that's a question mark which I don't have an answer to because I don't have deep experience of this state of concentration, of this state of experience. So I don't think I can really give a useful answer to your question. Sorry.
And Sally says, may I ask, how could someone contemplate anicca, dukkha, anatta, insight knowledge while in jhāna, while jhāna has one-pointedness of mind?
So jhāna has unification of mind, in that the mind is not scattered or dispersed. So that's actually incredibly useful for developing vipassana, because then the mind is not going to be pointed at anything other than the vipassana reflection, the vipassana perception. So the mind is not going to be dispersed or scattered. So with an ordinary mind, when we're practicing, for example, anicca sanya, the recognition of impermanence, we kind of do it half-heartedly for about 1/10 of a second, and then we space out and start thinking about cats and butterflies and chocolate, and then we go back to perceiving impermanence in a kind of half-hearted, minimal way for another 1/10 of a second or so. And then we're off to thinking about bamboo soup and thinking about sweet potatoes and thinking about taking naps. And then we go back to the recognition of impermanence for another 1/10 of a second or so. And so practicing in this way is not terribly effective, but it's better than nothing. Whereas in jhāna, when you put your mind on something, it stays. Much more effective. You put your mind on impermanence and it stays. Without wavering, without trembling, without pulling away. It stays. Much more effective. Okay?
And she also asks, may I ask which suttas Buddha mentioned about what is stream entry or what is definition?
A really great one for this is the Kosambhya Sutta in the Majjhima Nikaya. So the first half of the Kosambhya Sutta is about arguments and how to live peacefully in community. But the second half is describing various characteristics of a stream enterer. And this is very interesting because in that sutta, the Buddha goes into quite a bit more detail about what a stream enterer acts like and how they think and how they feel. And it's also interesting to note that in that sutta, the Buddha doesn't talk at all about the moment of stream entry. He talks entirely about the conduct of a person after they attain stream entry. And that is what he gives as being the criteria for determining whether or not someone is a stream enterer. Not what sort of experience they had, but rather how do they act in their everyday life after that experience. So that's a really interesting sutta to look at if you want to learn more about stream entry. There's a number of other discourses where the Buddha talks about stream entry to one extent or another. But the Kosambhya Sutta is one which is particularly worth looking at because it does give these very useful ways of looking at and reflecting on stream entry after the fact.
Thank you, Bartholomew. You can study that sutta in a few weeks.
Sure.
Mehmet says, as I understand that stream entry is the first direct experience of the truth. It might be an interpretation. Some see complete enlightenment as being in that state all the time. I think there is the other view that it is a different experience, as you said.
Yeah, as far as I can tell from the suttas, stream entry is not a direct perception of absolute reality, because if it was, it would be full enlightenment. Rather, it's kind of a hazy, distorted glimpse at best. But realistically, what it comes down to is one is taking that first major irreversible step towards full enlightenment. So clearly saying that body and mind are not me. It's kind of like if you enter a 4-story building and you go into the first floor, then nobody would say, "Oh, now you have a clear understanding of the 4th floor." No, they would say, "Okay, you've entered the first floor." Then you go up to the 2nd floor of the building. Nobody would say, "Okay, now you've had a glimpse of the 4th floor." No, they would just say, "Okay, you're on the 2nd floor." You go up to the 3rd floor. Again, nobody would say, "Okay, now you've seen the 4th floor." No, you're on the 3rd floor. Then you go up to the 4th floor. Now you see the 4th floor. And you're like, "Oh, all this time I've been getting closer to the 4th floor, but I never actually saw it until now." So that's my understanding based on the suttas, is that stream entry is a major step towards awakening, but you still haven't seen the truth clearly. Once returner, another major step, but you still haven't seen the truth. Non-returner, another major step, but you still haven't seen the truth. Arhat, oh, now you see it. Now you see it. That's what it is. And you realize you've been moving towards it all along, but that you never actually saw it until that final step. So that's my understanding from the suttas. Again, there's some later medieval literature produced by later Buddhist practitioners, which give a rather different picture. And that's fine, I suppose. It just doesn't have anything to do with the suttas. And it's not likely that it therefore has much to do with what the Buddha was talking about. So I'm not a fan of this idea that when one attains stream entry, one gets a temporary glimpse of nibbana. I don't even know what that would mean. Because as I understand what the Buddha is talking about, there's no such thing as a temporary glimpse of nibbana. Once you see it, that's it. End game. Story's over.
Thank you, Bante. And Jen says, sometimes I feel you guys are way too smart for me. At times I have to listen to these 2-3 times to finally understand. And Suzanne says, I'm with you, Jen. Very studious Sangha.
Well, sadhu, sadhu, sadhu to you for sticking with it and trying to learn more. And remember that ultimately Buddhism is actually really simple. It's
there was
one of our audience members just started laughing when I said that. So Buddhism is very simple. It's just about seeing your dukkha and letting go of it. That's it. If you can do that every moment, then you'll move unerringly towards enlightenment.
And that's also why in the Zen tradition, they cut all of this off.
Yeah. Put down the books and just practice. Yeah. I'm a fan of picking up the books from time to time, though.
Yeah, it's a good balance. So that's what we do at Buddhist Summits. Sometimes we pick up the books and then sometimes we put them on the floor.
Not on the floor. That would be disrespectful.
Oh, that's true. Well, on the floor on top of nice little
cloth.
Cloth.
Yeah.
Yes. All right. And Greeno Bino says, I'm reminded of Majjhima Nikaya 52 as another example of entering the jhāna and reflecting on them while remaining in them. Any thoughts on that sutta, Bante?
Do you remember the name of it? Oh, I'll pull it up on my screen here, but if you can tell me anything about it before then, that would help. Atthika Nagara Sutta? Yeah. This is one I reference this one a lot, the Atthakkanagara Sutta, because this is another one where the Buddha clearly talks about perceiving impermanence while in jhana. So practicing vipassana while in jhana. Yeah.
And Keith from Australia says, Jen, I need more than 2-3 times. I love you guys. So Edith says, stream enter equals partial understanding with some delusion still remaining, like 50%.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
Sally says, sorry, Bhante, above question is, for example, someone attains jhana via mindful breathing while he's in jhana. His mind totally one-pointedness with the nimitta, right? How to do vipassana?
So nimitta means object of awareness. So whatever object of awareness you're focusing on in order to stabilize the mind, then you perceive it as impermanent. You recognize that it's impermanent. You recognize that it's insubstantial. That's a very direct way of practicing vipassana while in jhana. Okay.
She also said, I thought one needed to emerge from jhana to do vipassana.
Yeah, so this sutta is one of many suttas which clearly indicates that you do not need to emerge from jhana to do vipassana. Though it also depends to some extent on the kind of vipassana practice that you're doing. So some forms of vipassana practice are much more suited to engaging in while in jhana, and others that are more active or more involved might be more challenging or more difficult to do when the mind is that still. But yeah, as this is one of the reasons why I like to talk about the Anupada Sutta and the Atthakkanagara Sutta, is that both of these suttas are places where it very clearly, undeniably says that you can practice vipassana while in jhana. That you do not need to emerge from jhana first.
All right, so I think that's all for now. As Drew says, Sadhu Bhante, thank you for the Sutta study. Take care, everyone. Yes, so Sadhu, Sadhu, Sadhu. All right, well, thanks again, Bhante, for offering so many teachings multiple times a day. So this evening, Bhante will be offering another teaching.
Oh, it's not your turn?
Tomorrow
is your turn.
I do not remember what subject is this evening, but
the Dhamma. We'll be talking about the timeless Dhamma.
Yes, either we will be talking about the Dhamma or we will be talking about the Dhamma. So you can tune in at 7:30 p.m. and there will be metta meditation followed by talking about the Dhamma with Bhante Sudaso. And then for the rest of the week, always 8 a.m. Sutta study, and then in the evening, meditation and Dhamma talk. And this upcoming weekend, we will be having little weekend retreat with the focus on strong emotions. So hopefully you'll join us for that as well. All right. Thank you so much for everything and see you all soon. Bye. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.